Okay, cool. So, yeah, so here is the second session. So, just before we jump into the second session, I just wanted to cover what we did it in the session one so that the people who have newly joined will have an idea of what is already covered. So, this shouldn't actually take a lot of time so that we can ramp up the other people who have newly joined also to the same level of what the other folks are already in. Okay. So at any point of time that we wanted to look at the old data or whatever it is, so please go to this link, which I will share it on the IM itself. So you people can download the sample data that we have. So I'm just going to download this, or just let's say edit this, and show you quickly like what we did last week and how did we create a pivot table out of a data set that we had, right? So yeah, here is the data that we have. So I'm just shrinking the data. So basically we would have had like 80 plus columns and 800 plus rows. So this we have close to 825 rows. And to select the data, right shift, control shift and right arrow, that selects the top headers of the data set that we have, and then control shift down. So this again selects the entire data that we have. And for inserting or creating the pivot, insert and then pivot table, and then automatically, if you see here, A1 is to CE, which is the column that we have, and 825 rows that we have, right? So we are gonna add this to a new data sheet. So new data sheet is selected, and we click on OK, and here is where you have this new pivot table created. Here are those 88 columns that we had, and let's say if you wanted to bring in anything, so there are 4 buckets here. One is like row and another one is column, and if you wanted to put any filter to that and the value. So I think people are little confused about the row and column, right? So just when you, so my way of visualizing it or memorizing, like to avoid the confusion of what is a row and what is a column is, I always imagine this as the symbol when I see a column, right? And when I imagine row, this is what is the symbol that pops up in my mind, right? So graphically, when you remember stuff, you can it is hard to forget, right? So don't worry, people. So it's gonna be handy after some time you work on this, right? So yeah, so let us take supervisor name. What is the supervisor name? Yeah, supervisor name to the row. So obviously rows are something which is arranged horizontal, so we have got all of the managers on the floor, and then I wanted to see the employee ID as a count, so I'm bringing it here, and if you see, by default it is counting. So if you wanted to change it, in this case it doesn't make any sense, so count is the only one which makes sense. So count, and it says each and every manager. What is this trying to tell us? Each and every manager has so-and-so employees reporting to them. So let's say now I wanted the employee name next to each and every manager. So I just had to bring it to the row again. So this gets the each and every manager here and the reporting employees. And if I wanted to expand or collapse, I can do that. Expand, go to this and collapse. And if I wanted to collapse everything at the same time, I can click on like collapse the entire this one. And if I wanted to expand a specific manager's information, I can do that, and I can see the subtotal of that particular manager, which is right next to the manager's name, and again I can shrink it, right? So let's say if I so far no questions, right? So I hope you guys would have already tried and with all of these, and so let's say job title, if you wanted to add it as a filter, yes you can. And let's say whichever has a title, like let's say advisor. That is why orders, because so I'm just gonna select only the name with advisor, and then obviously the count differs, right? So basically this is how you use a filter, row and a value. Let's say if I wanted to bring this to the column, so obviously now it looks a little weird in this particular case, but I would still wanted to show you how the data looks if you bring the same information to the column, right? So I'm bringing back the manager name back to the row itself, so now it looks better, right? So yeah, and addition to that, adding a column or inserting or deleting a column will automatically increase the range that is selected in the analysis tab and the field that is selected. Change data source, if you go, it shows from where, which range to which range. So let's say if I add a new column, so the CE will automatically get incremented to CF, right? So that is how the Excel is working, right? So we are good with what we have covered last week. So I think it is time for us to jump into the functions, right? Any questions, people? Any questions?
No. No questions, Balaji.
Okay, fine. So in short, right, so what does a function means? Just don't think as a programmer or an Excel guy. So just think what does a function means, right? So all of this, what we write, this cool stuff which starts after equal to in Excel, right? So let it be a VLOOKUP or a sum or whatever it is. All of these are functions. Those are like predefined functions. So let's say what in a normal English, right? So what does a function mean? So example, let's say if there is a marriage, we call it as a marriage function, right? So basically, it is a set of procedure or a set of instructions that are given to a computer, right? So that is what function means. So a function can take a value to that to execute through the steps, and it can produce a result, right? So let's say let's go back to the legacy example that we were talking about. So marriage is a function, right? So the variables are gonna be like the bride and the groom, right? So let's say in Excel term, if there is a function, so we will start with like equal to, then marriage is the function name, and then the open brace, then we give the bride name and the groom's name, right? So that is what is the function means, right? So basically, function as a definition, what it means is a set of procedure, right? Just give me 1 second, people. So coming back to the function. So basically, function means it is just a set of program, right? So in a program, I can say whatever that I wanted to process with the data, I'm getting it as an input. So let's say sum is a function, and I have variable A and variable B, right? So variable A is 10 and variable B is 20. So if I do a sum of this two, what will it produce is 10 plus 20. 30 is the result. Right? So this looks to be a very simple math, obviously. But when you decorate it with a specific procedure and a function or a set of instruction to the computer, then you call it as a function. Does it make sense? What does a function means by definition? Any questions?
Yes. No.
Okay. Cool. So okay, so this brings to another question. So when I said like A and B are variables, right? So A and B are variables. So what does a variable means? So variable is nothing but it is something which is, just imagine variable as a container, right? So it is like your teacup. So let's say you can pour tea in that, or let's say a coffee in that. So it is a container which can hold something. It is a container which can hold a value in it, right? So that is what is a variable means. So basically the function that you are generating or trying to use will be looking for a variable, right? So in this case, A and B are the variables. So when I say it is a container and it can hold something in that, so it is currently the variable A is holding the value 10 in that, right? And let's say a variable B which is holding value 20 in that. So now I can change this to 40, or I can change this to 100, or I can say this to, let's say, ABC. Now with text as a value is what is stored in variable A, right? So variable is nothing but it is just a container which is holding a value in it, right? And what kind of variable can be stored in that? That depends on the size of the variable that is defined, right? So let's say if I'm declaring variable A as an integer, right? integer is one of the data type that we have, so it can store numbers in that, right? So obviously if I type in ABCD and then try to store it in variable A, it'll throw error. Does it make sense? So did everyone get what does variable means?
Yes, Balaji.
Cool. So thanks Sylvester. So basically variable means it is just a container which is holding a value, and you can pass it to a function and then get a result. So let's say this result which has been calculated with this small with this plus operator here, which is manually calculated. If Excel has to do that, right? So how does the Excel do? So always a function will always start with an equal to symbol in Excel, right? And then you start typing in the function name itself, which is like sum, SUM, and then to bring up the open bracket, I'm just gonna press a tab. So this automatically puts open bracket to that, and it is asking for a parameter or a variable, right? So number 1 is the parameter that it is asking, so I'm gonna pass this as the value, right? And then I had to move to a different parameter on the variable, which is number 2, which is separated with this comma operator. So I'm giving a comma next to that, and then I'm selecting this 100 as the second value. And then since the number of parameters that I had to pass for this particular function is only 2, I had to just close this bracket, or I don't have to close this bracket and just had to say enter. So this will automatically, so to see what is the formula that I've written, I'll have to press F2. So this shows what is the formula that I've written in that. So this says sum, which is the function name, which is a predefined simple function that is already created in Excel, and I have passed 2 different variables to that. So which is B2, which is 40, and C2, which is 100. So this is basically the address of where a particular value is stored, right? So basically this is the address for this particular cell in this Excel, right? So let's say this cell is F2. First comes the column name and then comes the row name, right? So I'm passing the address B2 as the first number variable that I'm passing for summing it up, and C2 as the second variable for passing a different number and getting the result, right? So this and this obviously matches, right? So this is a very simple function that we had started off with, which is just a sum function. Does anyone have a question on how to use a sum function? Pay attention. So because this is a super important thing on how this is basically the foundation of learning other functions that we're going to discuss on, right? So is everyone clear on that? So you don't have to be worried about what kind of a question that you're going to ask. So please ask any kind of a question that you have. So I'll be more than happy to help you understand or explain the same, right?
We are clear with the sum function.
Great, thanks. So here what we have done is if at the moment that I release this, so this is actually holding this as the function and it is producing the result, right? So let's say if I had to modify something here, instead of 100 I'm gonna change this to 200. So as soon as I hit enter, this will automatically populate the new updated value of this particular thing and it produces the result. So what does this mean is sum, which is a function of Excel, is forced to recalculate whenever there is a column, whenever there is a cell that is entered or made any kind of a modification, it is forced to recalculate the value that is stored in that particular cell. So this kind of a function in Excel is called as a dirty function. So whichever the function which recalculates when you enter a new data into a different cell, it recalculates this data, right? So this is what in Excel is called as a dirty function. Is that clear?
Yes.
Cool. So yeah, great. So let's say now I see that I have a simple plus symbol here, right? Even a first standard kit could do that, right? So I'm just gonna add this and this. So why do we need Excel to do this? Why do I need a simple function like a sum, which can be done with this plus operator, right? So I'll show you what is the significance of this sum function and how it is useful compared to this plus operator. Okay. So let's say I have the same set of value that I have. I'm gonna highlight this with boundary like this, right? And I'm gonna copy the same set of data right here, and I'm gonna add a new row here and call this, let's say, instead of having 30 as a number in column A, right? So let's say I change this to a text, which is XYZ. Okay. So the minute that I change the value that is stored in A to XYZ, it is a text. Obviously, it is a text, right? So the plus symbol that I had here throws an error, right? Which means it was actually expecting a number to be here, but instead we had passed a text, right? And because of which it has thrown a value error in Excel, right? So if you hover on this, you get to see what is the error and what does it means, right? So it is basically a value error. But still, if you see the sum function that has tried calculating the same, it has given you the right value, which is like 200 plus nothing. I mean, that is just a XYZ text, which is 200, right? So now you see the significance of sum function in Excel. So basically, sum function is designed to see whether the variable that you pass is actually a number. If it is not, it ignores. Right? So you can define that kind of a structure or define that kind of a protocol or a functionality within a function, right? So that is the significance of using a function like sum in Excel, right? Any questions, people? So did you guys understand what is the difference between using a plus operator here and sum function here? Was that clear?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yes, just a minute. Cool. Great. So, yeah. So the next most important thing that we're gonna see is the beauty of Excel, which is like you don't have to. In this case, we have passed each and every variable. Like, let's say if I wanted to add one more item, like C, right? Same format. So how do I copy the same format? I copy something which is already having that format, move to that cell, and then Control Alt V, and this brings up a pop-up, and all I want is just the source theme, and click on OK. So it pastes the entire stuff what I want, but I'm gonna change it to C. Okay. So here I'm passing a value like 30. And I wanted this to be added with this as well, this number as well, right? So, which is like I'm passing n. I can pass n number of variables. This 3 dots means that I can pass n number of values into this particular function called sum, right? So does it really is it so difficult to add this 3 by giving each and every cell reference? So cell reference, when I say cell reference, it is G3 is the cell reference for XYZ, right? H3 is the cell reference of 200. So I3 is this value which is holding 30. So isn't it a little difficult for us to give each and every time a comma operator and then a variable to be passed? Right? So can Excel help us? Yes, Excel can help us. So dynamic range. So let's say we copy the same example here. So instead of giving
table names, wherever like destination tables, create a copy of the package. Tablesmith, you select the table, right? Drop down.
पे कॉपी करके कंट्रोल रिप्लेस कर देंगे तो क्या नहीं करना पड़ेगा
Just a minute, people. So to make it a little more clarified of what we are trying to do here, right? So yeah, yes. So here, when I'm using a sum function, instead of giving variables with a comma separator, right? I can just select this one and then I can hold shift button and then move my control shift and then right. So this makes the Excel to automatically select from G9 to I9, right? So this will still get me the sum. So you guys see what is the difference between this function which is used, which is right here, and this function that is used, which is right here. So here you're passing each and every variable with a comma separator, right? And here you're giving it as a range, which is with a colon, right? So which means you can dynamically give n number of rows that you want. And by the way, let's say if I add a new column inside and give a new variable like b1 and give a different value, this will dynamically change. The sum that I have here just dynamically changes. So now you understand sum a little better than what we had as a clarity when we were using it here, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah. Good. Cool. So any questions so far, people? How to use sum or whatever?
It will automatically take the source. You have to find the,
No questions. Is that right?
the source and
Yep.
server name.
Yep. Deepak, you have a question?
Calculations you want to do, then server name. You can actually
Okay.
not only move the same server, you can move to a different.
Cool. Yeah. Nice. So yes. So in the meantime, there are other similar kind of a function which is simple as sum. So there are other aggregative functions like average or max, min, whatever it is. So again, rand between is a function, right? So for getting that rand between, all I had to do is, so let me just zoom in so that people can see. So all I had to do is just put a equal to symbol. Before starting any function, I had to put an equal to symbol here and then start typing in the function name that I know, which is rand. So in this case, it is right second item that I have. So I'm just pressing down arrow and then a tab so that it auto completes, and then it puts open bracket. And here, if you see, it is trying to tell me what is the parameter that I'm supposed to pass. It has two parameters, which is this particular function is looking for two parameters. One is bottom and another one is top. So what does bottom and top means for the random between function is, I had to give a value which is I'm trying to generate numbers randomly between a range. Okay, so let's say I'm trying to generate values between random numbers between 1 to 100. So this is the function that I use. So the moment that I say enter, it produces a random number, right? So let's say I had to take 10 random numbers which ranges from 1 to 100. So this is how I do. Right, so is equal to rand between 1 to 100. So how cool was that? So let's say I just had the value at here, and for me to copy the same value, I just had to hover this mouse exactly on this particular place, and I just had to drag it down, right? So it autofills the values. I mean, it passes the same function to that, and it produces the result, right? So I have generated a random sequence of numbers, or which is like which is in the range of 1 to 100 from. Yeah, sure. So yeah, so column A1 is to A10, we had generated this random between functions, right? So as you see, as I type anything, like I said, right? So this is a dirty function in Excel. So whenever there is any change of a value in any cell, the data here gets recalculated. So it is again and again trying to generate a new number in that row, right? So I'll have to freeze this value. So I'm just copying it, Control C, Control Alt V, and then trying to paste it as a special function which is just values, so that it takes away the formula that was there and it stores the numbers in the cells. Okay, so now let's say this is the score, and I had to identify this is the score. Let's say the math score in a class of 10 people, right? So let's say I bring in name of the student as well. So name, which is N1, and once again, so I'm just dragging it down. If you see, it is auto populating with this small symbol of N2 here. So N3, N4, N5. So it arithmetically it progresses the number, right? So N1 to N10 is populated, right? So N1, there is a person called N1 in my class, and in math he has scored 41. And N6, I see that he has scored 97. So I'm here to find who's the one who have got the highest mark out of this entire set of score list that I have, right? So how do I do that? So there is obviously a function to simplify the work. So what is it that I'm trying to find? Max mark.
Maximus.
So as usual, people, so how do we start a function in Excel?
Equals.
Great. So equal to, and then I start typing in M, and then I see that MAX is there. So I just press a down arrow key and then say tab. So it auto completes this and it opens the bracket and it is asking for numbers. So if you remember this dots, 3 dots, it means that it can be passed with n number of items, not just 1 or 2. So I'm not gonna pass 1, 2, 3, which is going to take me ages. So I'm going to pass it as a range. So I'm selecting 41, which is B2, and Control Shift down. So this automatically brings up that range, and I'm done with it. And since I'm a lazy person, I'm not going to close this with a close bracket. So I'm going to press enter, and this brings up the max number, which is 97. Right? How simple was that? So just imagine, people, so years back, not years back, so like 20 years back, right? So if you had to actually do the same exercise using paper and pen, it was really very difficult. So Excel is something that is really which has made the life so simple. Hi Bhavani, thanks for joining. So how many new folks have joined after we have started? So do we need a refresher? Okay, if so, real quick, within 1 minute, we can try refreshing what we have seen so far. So we were trying to explain what is a function and a variable. Function is nothing but a set of instruction which is designed or predefined. For example, marriage is a function, and the variable that you pass is the bride and the groom, and the result is marriage. And function is something which will always return a particular value, or not all the functions has to return a value. A function not returning any value itself is a value. So obviously function always returns a value, right? And second thing is the variable. So in this case, we have two variables, A and B. And here in this example, we have used a plus operator to sum this 30 and 200. And it has produced a result of 230. And if you're using the sum function here, and you had given two items here, B3 and C3, and again the sum matches with what we have, right? So now the folks on the call were asking that there is no point in having this cool function called sum, because the plus operator itself did this job. So then I had to tell, why do we need a function? So let's just imagine if there is a data entry error in the same item that we have, and that is filled as XYZ instead of this number 30, right? So XYZ is obviously a text which doesn't make sense to sum it up. So this plus operating symbol has obviously thrown a value error, whereas the function that we had used, which we passed 3 different parameters here, this ABC values, and it has produced a result of 230, which means XYZ is ignored by the sum function. So that is one cool feature of sum function, and the same thing remains here. And in this case, I haven't given here as this way, and instead I have upgraded it to this way, right? So I'm giving it as a range, right? So that was a very odd color to choose. Yeah. So I have passed here 3 different addresses, G3, H3 and I3, and instead here I have passed it as a range, which actually simplifies my job. So all I had to do is just select like this and Control Shift right, so it selects my range, and I'm able to get the sum value, right? So that is the sum function that we covered, and then we tried to generate random numbers between 1 to 100, which was like random between, and then 1, 100 we gave, and we pulled off the same function as all, and then we got a different set of results for all of these name 1 to n, which we populated easily with this way. And whenever there is any change in any cell, the data gets refreshed in this range of cells that we have. The reason behind is the Excel functions are called as dirty functions, which means the data in each and every cell gets recalculated, forcefully recalculated every single time that you bring in any change in any cell, right? So I'm pasting this as value so that this random function did the job that we wanted it to do. So it's all fixed, and here is the max function. So max, MA, then down arrow, tab, and then I'm selecting the range, Control Shift down, and then close bracket. 91 is the top score. So here is N2, which has taken 91, right? Now people, coming back to the same square where we left to go for the refresh class. So next I'm trying to find the min mark, right? Yeah, once again people, everyone, so tell me, how do we start a function?
Equals.
Cool. So equal to and min, down arrow, tab, and again selecting the range, closing it off. I can either choose to close this off and then press enter, or I can just leave it as it is and just run enter. So the Excel will put the bracket for me, and minimum marks is 10. So looks like N9 is the poorest kid in the class, and N2 is the brightest guy who has scored the highest mark in math, right? Any questions in using max and min function in Excel?
No.
Great. Someone have pen? Cool. No questions at all. Great. Cool. Okay. Then here comes the score for the teacher. So the average. So the teacher will be evaluated by the headmaster by seeing what is the average score that is scored by the entire class, right? So here comes the fourth aggregative function that we have, right? So for calculating the average, all I had to do is start with the equal to, as it is for the other function that I start, and type in AVE, and it brings up all the possible functions, down arrow once, then tab. It puts the open arrow for me, open bracket for me, and I'm selecting the range that I want. Closing it off or not closing it off doesn't make any difference. And the average is 39.5. So the teacher...
Balaji?
Yep.
If let's say that as in some function, even if there is no number and n6 is absent.
Sorry, Bhavani, please come again.
So if let's say that n6 doesn't have a value, but it does have stating that absent.
Correct. So I just deleted the number, right? So it still produces the result.
It will still produce, okay.
Correct. So how does this? Good question, Bhavani. So how does this happens is, like in some function, right? So it first checks. Here, if you see the value that we have written, the values that we have passed, XYZ, is actually a text. So according to this sum function, it doesn't make any change at all. Why? Because it first checks if each and every item is a number first. If it is there as a number, only then it calculates. So instead of this, if I even delete, this doesn't make any difference. So let me put it back to XYZ, and we are back to sheet 2. So here N9 was there with some value which is 10. So putting that value back, so it again repopulates. So I can even here type it as XYZ, right? It still produces the result for the other 9 students who are there in that class, right? So good question. So any other question, people? I really encourage people asking more questions so that the larger audience and they themselves get benefited, right? So do ask questions. Any questions? Okay, we have identified who have scored the highest mark and who have scored the lowest mark, I mean by the mark, and we have calculated the average, right? So everything that we have calculated with a function, I'm highlighting it with green, right? Any questions so far, people? Nothing? Are we good to go with the next function?
Yes.
Great. So for the sake of having let's say I'm just duplicating this. So how do I duplicate the sheet? So I just right click on this and I see that move a copy, and I'm trying to create a copy. So I have options to select different book. So since I have only one book opened here, I'm getting book 1. So let book 1 be the same as default, and I'm creating a copy, right? And I'm trying to move to the end. So okay, so this has given a new name with within the bracket number 2. And here we are trying to see how to use a if condition, right? So for the sake of bringing in I'm deleting it. So did you guys see how did I delete it? So I first clicked on this selects the entire column, and then shift this side. I have selected two columns and then say delete, right? It deletes. So now let us see how to use if condition, right? So now the second biggest thing that I had to do is out of this 10 people that I have it in my class, I need to see who have passed and who have not passed, right? So so here the threshold for a student to be pass or fail, so it is 35. Let's assume 35, right? So if, and then open bracket. So did you guys see how did I put that if? So equal to, as I use all the other functions, then I start I, and on, the first function itself is if, so I'm pressing tab, and then it brings up the open bracket. And this time it is not an array that I had to pass, it is a single value, which is a logical test, right? So if this is greater than 35, right? So this fulfills my logical test that I wanted to do. I'm giving a comma so that it switches to the next item that I'm supposed to pass. If I say backspace, the comma is gone and it is back to logical test. So I had to move to the next one, so I'm giving a comma. So it moves to value if test, a value if true. So let's say if B2 is greater than 35, here is where the if function will land. Let's say if this condition fails. When I say condition is failed, let's say if we write the same function here, obviously it is greater than 35, so it will be true. In this case, it is the opposite, so this will land on false, right? So for true, when it is a pass, what I had to flag it as, I am trying to flag it as number 1, right? And this fulfills my second item that I'm trying to pass. So I'm giving a comma separator, so it moves automatically the highlighted parameter to the third last one, which is value if false, right? So simple, 1 and 0, right? And I'm closing the bracket, closing the function. So if I say enter, so what will be the result?
False.
Okay, right student, who's that?
But I thought it is going to give us false FALSC. Okay.
Thanks. So I do test people whether they have fallen asleep or they are still listening to the class.
No, one student here said 0. Okay.
Oh, okay, nice. So that confirms that all of the other people were in mute. So because of which I couldn't hear. With the same assumption, let's continue the class. So yes, cool. So now this has dynamically produced all of the results that we want, right? So if you see 91 is here as 1, 23 is 0, which is like fail, and 21 is 0, fail, and 1 pass.
Balaji, I have a question.
Yes, please.
So always the value is going to be 1 or 0, or we can define any value.
Correct, you can
Okay.
define anything that you
Okay.
want, right?
Number one. Number two, okay, like this, can we define like true or false also? I mean, it is user defined, right?
Yeah. It is. But I'll have to get to that, right?
Okay.
So I'm gonna say either 1 or 0, right?
Got it.
That is
Got
the
it.
result it is trying to produce.
Got it.
Let's say if I'm trying to produce true or false, is that possible? Yes. So Excel understands 1 as true and 0 as false. Okay. So let us once again write this function, people. Equal to if tab if this is greater than 35, comma false. See, it automatically brings up that as well, right? False. Or I can bring up any customized way of doing that as well. Shall we try that?
Pass or fail?
Yeah, pass or fail.
Somebody wants to try? If you give control.
Or
Yeah.
pass or fail, as somebody was saying here, you put in inverted commas, right? And then that's when you get it. If 23 is greater than 35, then comma, then open the inverted commas, then put true, close it.
No, just pass.
Oh, the pass, yeah. The
Good. We can just put pass or comma fail, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll have to check it out.
Do you have to use the inverted commas?
I have no clue. We'll have to check. Oh, I don't think so. We have to just take comma, pass. It's a value.
Okay, tell me what am I supposed to use to get pass or fail then?
Okay, just take away that double quotes and just say open braces, whatever. I mean rectangular one. Hi. I don't no idea. Let's say. And then
Okay.
give that
But
pass.
the actual way is supposed to be pass.
Oh, is it okay? Double quotes. I see.
Let us see at least if this gives the result that we want. Unfortunately, it gave us the result.
What did I say then?
So it's just double quotes. Got it.
Okay, so this is the thing that you'll have to give. Good answer, Sylvester. So yes, it is possible to customize, and we can give it as a pass or fail. So all of this says either pass or fail, right? So we are trying to represent it as 0 and 1, or pass, true or false, or pass or fail, right? Cool. Does anyone have any questions in if condition?
Balaji is Kevin,
Hi, Kevin.
Yeah. So how do you use, we can use multiple if functions, right? In one.
Correct. Nested if functions, yes, you can use. So yes, we can. Let's say, good question, Kevin. So let us try complicating it, right? Nested if. So I'm trying to calculate if it is above average or below average. If it is pass, only then I'm checking. So let us say the first obvious condition that remains is if this particular person is, we'll take it from here or we'll write it there. Okay, for the sake of simplifying it, I'll do it this way. So this is the second if condition, people. So you remember, so if this condition is a success, right? So this will land here. If not, it will land here, right?
Yep.
So if is equal to 0, this is equal to 1, then second is the if condition that I'm passing. If this particular value is greater than the average that we have calculated, then say above average. Okay, so this is example of nested if. So now you see that ugly false comes up, right? So how do we handle that? So the moment that this one fails, where does the if condition lands? Here, right? Have I given any value here after that? No, right? So what does that means is the if condition is not expecting me to pass these two items, right? So how do I say that if is not actually expecting me to pass that function? You see that square bracket here for value 2 if true and value if false, there is a square bracket next to this. So which means it is an optional item for me, right? So that is why I gave this, which is this. And did you see I did not separate it from here with a comma operator? So I haven't given a false condition at all. So that is the reason I'm by default getting false, right? So I'm now giving that as below average, right? Be below average, right? And I'm passing the same value. By the way, how did I do that? So I'm copying this and I'm selecting this entire thing and Control D. So this copies the entire same formula throughout the column that I had. Okay. So
Balaji,
yep.
you want to explain it once again? Can you just do it?
Yes, sure. So we will do it here, right? So is equal to if this particular thing, which is already a pre-calculated if this is equal to 0, or sorry, if this is equal to 1, then it is a pass, then it is supposed to land on this second if condition. Reduce the size so that it gets covered in the screen. Are people still able to see the screen and see what is the function that I'm writing?
Yeah.
Cool. So if the first condition is let's say this particular item is equal to 1, which means it is a pass. You see this optional item because it is in square bracket. So okay, fine. Sylvester, even before the interesting question that you asked, so let's say if this is equal to 1 and I just close this off, what will it say? I gave the answer and then I asked. Okay, cool. So it will still throw an error because at least I'm supposed to pass one single item. Okay, so let's say comma, we go to the second item that we have, which is the second if condition, which Kevin was interested in, knowing the nested if condition. So is this score B2 is greater than the average that is pre-calculated, right? And here, sorry guys, I actually forgot to lock this item here. So how do I lock is, I'll have to press F4 so that it brings up this cool dollar symbol here, which means the data, I mean, when we are copying this item at the bottom, it won't move from this position, whereas these two will automatically move, right? So we will have to correct it here as well. So yes, if it is greater than this, then it is supposed to tell of average, or else I'm closing this off and then saying below average and then closing this, right? So coming back to what I'm supposed to correct is greater than B12. I had to lock this and paste the same. So now it produces the right result that we want.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that locking. What is that? Why did you want to lock it? I mean,
Great question. So let's say I copied, so you people remember, so let's say I delete this and I'm copying this same formula at the bottom, right? So as I move, so there is a difference here, right? So if you guys note where the mouse pointer is as I move down or up, so you see that some number is changing there, right? So C2, C3 it becomes, then when I come down C4 it becomes C5. So there is a difference, right? So what does that means, right? So basically the Excel is gifted with the ability to move from one cell to the other cell automatically when you copy and paste the formula, right? So you don't see any dollar symbol next to C or number 2, right? Which means it is free to move relatively when you copy paste it into any place within the Excel, right?
got the idea. Okay, got the logic. Yes.
Yeah, so when it is B12, it is actually locking this specific cell so that it doesn't.
All the other rows can actually, check only that value, particular
Correct.
value.
So if you come down, right? So now we are in F2. So let's say if we come down, wherever you go, if you see B12 is a constant, right? So Deepak, to answer your question, so this value is actually a dirty function, which is average of these numbers. So currently, since this numbers doesn't change, so this will be a constant. Right, so here it is constantly referring to this address, which is B12 in this Excel sheet, which is B12. So obviously this is going to be a constant when you copy paste this entire thing, right? So it is populating based on this fixed value, which is populated here. Does that answer your question, Deepak?
Yes, Balaji.
Cool. Any other question, people? So this is very super important.
Okay,
Yeah.
Sorry,
Bhavani.
So on to make that as how did you get that dollar symbol and all? What did you Control D?
So there is a cool way to do that. So either I can type in a dollar symbol by shift and number 4, or I can just let's say right now it is not there. I just select that particular thing, highlight it with shift and then press F4. It simplifies my job. So once again, if you do the same, the locking gets changed, right? You keep on pressing F4, either the column can be locked or the row alone can be locked, or both can be locked or released.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. If let's say that I want to add two more students.
2 more students. Okay. So let's say we introduce insert and then insert in 11 and 12 random between 1 to 100 and pasting this as values and pasting this all of the items as the same, right? So what did this do? It automatically changed the range from B2 to B13, right?
Right. And I want to see that,
and unfortunately here if you see, it is still referring to this, which is wrong.
That is what I want to know. Yes.
So okay, fine. So since Bhavani had asked this and how to make this a foolproof way to do it, right?
Because let's say that I'm actually going on adding the students. I wanted to actually do, the Excel should be smart enough to actually give me only at once.
Correct. How to make it dynamic, right?
By the time I reached on the fourth floor, I was like, I'm the
So it's only one way that we have to change the 12 to 14 because the average is moved to 14th row now.
1 minute, Bhavani.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, how to dynamically change that is, it is simple. So dynamically changing. So I'll reduce the font size so that it doesn't look ugly. So it still looks ugly. Manage with that, please. So yeah, here is dynamic average. So how do I do that? So if this item is equal to 1, obviously that is the first condition that I had to pass, not B2, it is supposed to be C2, and the first thing that it is supposed to do, the next thing that is supposed to do is average, right? So here is the next if statement, which is the nested one. So is this value greater than average of so unfortunately I can't select this entire thing because already there is an average, but let's assume that we didn't have this average here calculated, we have that pushed somewhere here. Okay, so this will dynamically populate the average of this B and B. Note that math score is a text, but still the average function will ignore that and bring the average of this particular item, this particular column, and if it is great, then it says above average, or else so since we spoke about that, let me move it somewhere, and now let us see what it says. So if you guys see, I cut that and pasted it, right? So this was here, I'm selecting it, Control X, it is cutting it and pasting it. All of this formula that I wrote with that particular formula is now referring to a new cell here, E16. Now at least do you guys see that you're supposed to love Excel? E16. It was earlier referring here, right? It automatically, as soon as I cut pasted it, it has changed the reference. It has changed, Excel has changed dynamically the reference, which was actually locked. And in this case, I had calculated the average of this entire column and it is producing the result. So I'm just highlighting this particular thing here and pressing F9. So it produces the result as 49.5. So how did I bring this 49.5? By pressing F9, right? I'm saying escape. So again, trying to highlight it and pressing F9, it is again producing the 47.5 as the result. So now let's say if you add one more student, right? Let's say you remove a student, right? So this will still automatically populate and produce the result. Does it make sense? Bhavani, does that answer your question? So has everyone fallen asleep already?
No.
Thanks, Akshata.
Okay, Balaji, once you're done, someone has a doubt here actually. So once you're done.
Once I'm done, someone have a question, is it?
Yeah, with function, yeah, whichever it is.
Okay, fine. So I think we are already on time. So 2 minutes, you guys came late, so we went extra 2 minutes. Okay, not to blame me. Just on a funny note. So is there any questions, people? I'll stop.
Yeah, there is a question here. Somebody has a question.
So yeah, please tell me what is the question that you have.
I wanted to know in the nested if function.
Every 10th word I'm able to hear.
Can you hear me now?
So
Balaji, can you hear me now?
unclear. Please explain. Yep.
Okay, so in the nested if function that you used, the second if function, right? Are we not supposed to write anything for if logical value for if value for false?
Okay. Yeah, you can write it, but unfortunately, this one what you're checking is a binary thing, right? So if it is 0 or 1 kind of a thing, so obviously if you give here, it doesn't make any sense. I wanted to explain that there itself, but I didn't want people to get confused, so I did not explain it. So if you give what is false here, it won't actually consider whatever you give here. It will still produce the result as below average, right? So it is a logical check, right? So is it greater than 0 or not? So the result produced by this particular condition is either 0 or 1.
Correct. So we need to define that, right?
Not necessarily. That is why we have this within bracket, right? Square bracket, right? So obviously it is not, which is a mandate function, so you don't have to feed that. Okay.
So if in that second if function, if the value of that logical function is false, it will move on to the first if function. And
Correct, and produce this false as result.
Right? Okay.
Correct, right? Any question, people? Nothing?
No.
Great. So I'm putting this item in the SharePoint, and you guys can go back and refer the same. So who have recorded this session, so I request them the same like what I requested last time. So put the recorded session on the SharePoint so that people can go back and refer. Right, Excel class 2, I'm bringing it up here and it is getting uploaded. So are we good?
Yes, that's so if you see here, cons retail, because that segment description is retail itself.
Cool.
But the
Yep, great.
what I would say is,
Thanks, people. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Balaji. Thanks, Balaji.
Bye.